Welcome back to the hustle. Welcome back, and of course to the grind. And we're going for another walk. You know what? I saw an article here today. I was watching a little video about how parents now, in some cases, are generationally passing down debt to their kids. And so if you're a child or now a growing adult or child, that you're trying to make a go of it, not just for your own life, but as well trying to maybe look at retirement at some level. And a lot of people now are absorbing their parents' debt. Their parents decided to actually, go on vacations, buy cars, go into credit card debts. And now, for me personally, I can relate. I'm an executor to an estate, my parents, so I can appreciate what it's like not having those financial burdens, but there's a lot of people that do. And so I want to talk about that a little bit because statistically, $61,554 is the average debt that is carried through when somebody passes away. So the average person that's 6 feet under still owes almost $62,000 to somebody somewhere. Some other sobering statistics. About 68% of people that are passing away have credit card debt. About 37% of the population still has outstanding mortgages. About 25% of people still are carrying car loan debt when they actually pass. And ironically enough, 12% have personal loans that they still owe money on, and even 5% still have student loans, if you can believe that. Some people like to go back as mature students and get a further education, or unfortunately the odd case where somebody younger goes. But the sad reality, a large number of people still carry debt when they pass. Like I said, well over $60,000 is the average debt load when somebody goes away. And so what does that mean as you're retiring? There's a high probability that you're probably going to pass some of that debt load down to your kids. But there's a lot of people now, sort of this moral feeling, this moral gut check that says, you know what, I can't do that. I don't want to do that. And rightfully so. Nobody really wants to hand the debt down. And the worst part is, we know already this generation coming up is having a tougher time financially. Now, yes, you got to work. Yes, you got to push. The work ethic's a big part of, how you make a go of it and how you succeed in life. But we all know that Social Security may or may not be there. And even if it is, it's running out of steam with relative to the cost of inflation and printing money. So Social Security is likely, or CPP in Canada, likely not going to go as far as it once did. Are they going to see moderate adjustments along the way? Possibly. But likely with the cost of living increases, you're probably not going to see the benefits there. Also, Medicare or, any kind of medical support or assistance as you age, that's going to get more expensive. Maybe you'll need a new car. You go into retirement with a car that's maybe 5 years old or 2 years old and you think, hey, I'm good. But what if it breaks? What if an engine blows up? These things are all huge costs that keep getting added. And all of a sudden now you find yourself having to throw a $10,000 engine rebuild onto your credit card. See, these are the things, the unexpected items that a lot of people just don't recognize. And it's hard. It is truly hard, especially when you're on a fixed income in the retirement. They say also when you're saving, so here's a rule of thumb, and I'm not a financial advisor, but I came across this other article. It's great because they said the average American should currently today be targeting have about 4 times their annual salary tucked away by the age of 50. Because by 50, you're still building steam. Most people aren't retiring at 50. I mean, ideally, the sooner the better. For me, it would have been like 55. Some people 60, 65 for others. But realistically, 4 times your annual salary. So if you let's just say you make $75,000 a year, by the time you're 50 years old, you should have 75, 150, let's say $300,000. You should have $300,000, $400,000 in the bank by the time you're 50 years of age, because it's still likely building a little inertia. There's still a lot of it's in savings. So it's still, collecting interest. And so, and you're still contributing likely at that point. Hang on. So this article I came across, or actually it was a bit of a video, where they talked about passing down the debt and passing down, all that accrued debt. So, could you imagine, your parents, say have all this debt, and maybe they owe the bank an extra $150,000 or $200,000 because, they went on a spending spree, or maybe, everybody kind of works with and lives within their means. We know that. What if your parents were doctors and lawyers, but maybe you didn't, as a younger up and comer, didn't aspire to seek out those higher paying jobs, and maybe you're a school teacher, and we know they generally don't pay as well as those other careers. So your parents build up and they're buying based on their needs and their expectations, and they might collectively be making $500,000 between the two of them, but you as a teacher might be making $70,000. So them actually accruing a debt of $200,000-$300,000 is really pocket change, and really in a best case scenario it may not be a big impact to them. But now you, as a little bit more moderate income earner, may not be able to cover that debt. So now you're absorbing that debt, and the idea of trying to look at early retirement pretty much becomes a more distant memory, or a more distant hope or dream, as you see what you have to cover these debts before you even get started. So the idea of not carrying debt to the next generation, that, like they say, the chain stops here. You've got to break the chain. You've got to break the chain, because at some point the next generation is going to have it harder. I almost guarantee it, because as we see inflationary increases, we've seen the natural trending. I mean, when you look at investments, you look at stock portfolios, you look at all these things, they all trend upwards over time. Value of homes go upwards over time. Inflation up, like everything goes up. So every generation following is always going to have a harder time, generally financially, than the generation before it. So why on earth would you want to pass that down? Why would you want to give people that kind of issue to contend with? And why would you want to have to actually pass that down to somebody that realistically may not even be able to afford it? So why would you want to do any of that? It's hard. I get it. It's hard. But as I already mentioned, a big part of the debt is centered around what? Mortgage, car loans, credit card debts. And so, I've mentioned this before, but realistically, as you go into retirement, and you'll be fixed income in retirement, but you don't want to hand that debt down, it does twofold. So eliminating debt does two things. Number one, it reduces your stress and your demand on what you actually need to retire. But it also ensures that any unexpected issues that come up financially, you're better likely to get a grab of it. You're better likely to get a hold of it. And there's a good possibility that you won't carry that debt through. Because I've mentioned this before, having a mortgage, it's hard. It's hard when you're in retirement. Now, is it impossible? No. And maybe you only got a year left, and you can work through that. And I'm talking significant debt. I'm talking you're halfway, 2/3 through your mortgage, but you still have a big chunk of it left. That's a hard place to be, because that's a lot of money owed yet. Or car loan. You go out and buy that new car, and we know car prices now. New trucks here are $80,000 or $90,000. Even a mid-level SUV by a Toyota now can even still cost you $50,000. So to get into a car loan as you enter into retirement is just setting everybody up for no success. Yourself for one, because now you're adding that financial burden. And on top of that, now you're potentially, you take out that loan, and we all don't know what our, the future holds. So there's a possibility that, on a 5-year loan term, you may only last 2 years. I mean, God forbid, hopefully you make it another 30, but there's just that unknown. And that's why these numbers are what they are. People are passing down debt, whether it's the car loans, whether it's the house loan, all of that. Credit card debt is a big one. Now, I think credit card debt's a little bit different. If you continually pay it off and you carry smaller balances, a lot of people pay that way because they gain benefits, travel points, and it's sometimes just almost easier to pay that way. But realistically, carrying credit card debt of significance is not ideal. Smaller amounts, fine. Like I said, if you're paying it off regularly. But the idea of carrying debt over to the next generation it just puts them on their heels. And we all love our kids. I love my kids. I know if you've got kids and all of that, you love them dearly too. And the last thing that any of us want to do is put them in a bad spot financially. So, I mean, from my perspective, and the way I see this, is eliminating all that debt. First of all, get rid of that mortgage. I mean, if you're a sizable way in and you've got a lot of equity, but you still have a long ways to go and you're thinking about retirement, one option may be to sell it and downsize, right? Take it and run, and then maybe even you come out even Steven possibly. Another one, you might even be able to get cash in the bank. If it's a big house and you're downsizing to a small condo or something, it takes less, there's less work to do, and you might save yourself some money. Otherwise, just work on focusing on paying down the big debts, the big items. Car loans. It's nice to have a new car, and if you're planning on buying a new car, maybe you are driving an old decrepit unit, sometimes it might be worth doing that, knowing that, say, look, hey, I'm 50 right now. I've got the capacity in my earnings right now. It might be, maybe worth picking up something super cheap. But even that, I wouldn't suggest getting into something expensive as you're into that space, because now you have a scenario where you're actually consuming income that could be reinvested. So a car is never really a great investment, but I understand people need to get around. So it's striking that balance of, having that new car so you're not dealing with a lot of troubles for the next few years in retirement. But the flip side is, again, if you're spending $40,000 on a new car for that 5 years, leading into retirement, I mean, could you imagine that $40,000 reinvested into, stocks or anything, something that might turn, maybe you can top up 401ks, maybe you can invest in other ways, turn that 40K into 80K. Now you've got an extra 2 or 3 years worth of income into retirement. So it kind of depends. You've got to balance it right. I don't think buying that $160,000 car as you sail into retirement on a fixed income is necessarily probably the best approach. So ideally, eliminate the car loans, the house, the debt, the credit card debts, trim them right down to a nub. And realistically, if you're even and you're zero, I mean, the best thing you can do then is basically pass that along. So think of it this way, and I think, okay, being mortgage free in our situation, it's nice peace of mind to know that, I have some savings, we have some investments, but if I keel over tomorrow, that I know that the kids will likely adopt the housing. Now, the only downside with this, and I mean, you can't fix that. Our system's broken. Capital gains starts to grip a hold of everything. And capital gains taxes in a lot of these countries just like to eat up all of those profits. I mean, ideally, if you set it up right, you need to talk to an accountant about that. But ideally, set up your kids, your grandkids, set them up for success. And in setting them up for success, you're indirectly setting yourself up for success. Because if you eliminated all that debt and going into retirement, knowing full well that you no longer carry that burden, well, then that also makes it easier for you, right? So yes, you're doubling down. There's a lot of this extra pressure to try to perform, to try to save, to try to eliminate all that debt. But in doing that, you're just going to help everybody. And again, we know the generation after generation is going to get harder and harder and harder as time goes on. So anyway, I just found it really interesting, because the last thing we want to see is, anybody living under bridges or having to take desperate measures just to survive. I mean, it's a hard, cold world out there. As we can see, it is really chilly. It's still below zero right now, but at least it's not quite as windy today as it was yesterday. So anyway, got the coffee. It's probably almost cold by now. It actually is almost cold. But anyway, yeah, I'd like to hear your thoughts. Any ideas on that? Ultimately, debt is one of our biggest enemies, looking at retirement as well as passing down potential debt, because almost everybody to the tune of over $60,000 is carrying some level of debt going into their final days. So anyway, hope to see each and every one of you on the next one. We'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.